WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. Today on the program, we'll recap yesterday's grand reopening concert at Michigan Central Station and hear from some of the people who were there about their experiences.
But first on the show, June is Pride Month. And as such, we plan to bring you conversations that spotlight and uplift our queer brothers, sisters, and non-binary individuals. Affirmations in Ferndale has been doing that work for a very long time. They offer a variety of services geared towards LGBTQ+ individuals, from behavioral health to gender and marker name change clinics. The nonprofit aims to treat all people with basic human rights. Joining us now to talk about Pride Month and what it'll look like for Affirmations is Cheryl Czach. She is the executive director of Affirmations. Cheryl, welcome to the Metro. My cheeks are like beaming. I'm smiling.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. So what's new with Affirmations? You're the new executive director.
I am the new executive director. I took the role in January. It's been really exciting. I've been involved with Affirmations for about a decade now, though. I started as a volunteer and then was on the board. I was the board president and now on staff. So, you know, the organization has my heart.
Yeah, I mean, you started all the way from the bottom all the way to the top now.
Yes, it's been a great journey.
Yeah, through that journey, what have you learned?
Oh my gosh, so much. I think with every view into the organization, I learn new things. And I'm always struck by how important Affirmations is to the community. You know, we've come a long way. I know it's Pride Month. We often reflect on where we've been, but we've come a long way. But still, places like Affirmations are still saving lives. They're still relevant. They're so important to our community.
And that's something that I often think about, and we've been having these conversations on the show throughout this first week so far of Pride Month, just talking about the need for these spaces, the continued need for these spaces, and why it's important that they still exist. We talked a little bit about how a lot of the third spaces, the LGBTQ plus third spaces, are kind of disappearing, whether it's the gay clubs or bars or just hangouts in general. We're starting to see them disappear. So if you can go into the importance of having these spaces continuing on throughout the generations.
Yeah, they are starting to disappear. And some people have said to me, especially as I'm stepping into this role, our places like Affirmations so needed because we have wider acceptance, because we can go to any bar in our area. Of course, I should caveat that because there are certainly areas within our state and even within our country that we can't do that. So our places like Affirmations, these third spaces relevant. And I say that they are because there's nothing like being with your community. That acceptance and that love and that freedom that comes from being in a third space that is LGBTQ is unmatched in other places.
Yes. So also, like I said, you're new to the role. You started in January. How do you plan to use this role to expand the work that's already being done at Affirmations?
Yeah. One of the areas that we've identified that needs expansion, and we're really excited to be doing it, is in our mental health services, our behavioral health services, and the wraparound services that come with it, like our food pantry as an example. So we will be starting construction probably towards the end of summer on renovating the lower level of our building to be able to expand our mental health services. So we're really excited about that.
So when we see that expansion, are we going to see more medical professionals in the building as well, spaces and places that people can kind of relax and chill? Like, what are we seeing here?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we hired our first director of health and human services last year. AF has never had one before, so that's exciting. And with that, we started to hire more therapists. So the therapy program is bigger than it's ever been. We'll have 5 full-time, fully licensed therapists on staff soon. 2 of them are telehealth so that we can see clients all throughout the state of Michigan. So folks who are in rural areas where it's hard to find someone who's a mental health professional who's queer, we've got that. Yes, and then of course we'll have more spaces to relax and enjoy.
Yes. Cheryl Czach is the executive director of Affirmations, chatting right now about Pride Month and everything that's happening with Affirmations, the organization. So with uplifting the LGBTQ plus community being a major focus, how do you all expand on that idea during Pride? What type of activities or any themed events that you all have planned?
Yeah, we have some exciting things. So we finished a few weeks ago. We had our adult Pride Prom.
Yes.
Last year was our inaugural year for that. We did it again this year. It's phenomenal. It's such joy in the center. So, If you've not been, you have to come next year. But we have our Youth Pride Prom coming up. So the Youth Pride Prom was an event. It was the first event Affirmations ever did. This is our 35th year.
Wow.
It was the first event we've ever done. And we continue it every year. So that is coming up on July 12th. And that is a free event. The theme this year is out of this world, so it's like a space theme. And our Youth Advisory Council helps us plan that. And it's ages 13 to 18, and it's a free event.
That's so beautiful. I remember reading about the youth prom last year, and it was just phenomenal to see those kids talk about being in a space where they could just be themselves.
Yes.
And that was really, really nice to read about. So, what are your thoughts? We talked a little bit about this before, but what are your thoughts right now on Pride Month itself and the messages that they're being told to the public, especially when we see everything from, major corporations putting pride flags up and just different things like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So Pride, of course, is a time for celebration. That's what it's about. And I love that organizations are stepping up to that. Of course, Pride is a year-long thing, right? It isn't we don't just put on our Pride t-shirts in the month of June and then forget about it. And I like to joke that being an ally is a verb, because we must do things with it, and we must do it year-round. And let's not forget that Pride started as a riot. Anytime anyone talks about Pride, they reflect back on that. Because although we've come a long way, there's still a long way to go.
And, if we can get into it just a little bit more, but that idea of allyship being a verb, not just, that's who I am, but it requires action. So if you can go into or expand on that idea of allyship being a verb, an action word.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of things folks can do when they're an ally that they might not realize. They often think of things like, I can volunteer my time, or I can donate money, I can wear my Pride shirt during Pride Month. There are other things that you can do. As an example, go to a rural Pride. There are so many more prides popping up in rural areas, and they often had to fight hard to get a license to have that pride. They're going to have backlash. Show up at a rural pride. Bring your family to them. That's one beautiful way to support the LGBTQ community. And I also say, we can do things every day, like using our pronouns. When we introduce ourselves, use our pronouns, put them on our LinkedIn profiles or email addresses. Those are signals that you're an ally to the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I know a lot of people just want to know, what can I do? What else can I do? So that was great. And, what messages need to continue to be told, or ideas or histories? We talked a little bit about, Pride starting out with a riot or rebellion or protests. So what are some ideals or histories that we have to continue to push forward as we continue to embrace LGBTQ plus stories into American history stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I think telling the Pride story, the Pride origin story, is really, really important, of course. And I think this idea that there's more work to do is also really important. I think that we can look around and see more and more people who identify as LGBTQ, especially with our young adults. I think in Michigan it's 24% roughly, whereas older adults, 50 and over, it's like 3.2%. So we think, we've made such progress, we can rest on our laurels. Well, we cannot. There's so much more work to do, particularly this November. Had to say that. So, who we vote for matters, even at the local level. So local, state, and of course, federally.
And with the state of Michigan just getting into politics, not too much, but just this thinking of the state of Michigan, where do we see our progress in terms of legislation or anything like that for the LGBTQ plus community? Yeah,
we've made so much progress with this pro-equality legislature, right? We have a governor that's supportive. We have support in both the House and the Senate. We've made a lot of progress. Modifying Elliot Larson for sexual orientation protections and gender identity protections was huge. We also things like the ban on conversion therapy for youth. So we've made great strides because of where we sit in Michigan right now.
Yeah. Cheryl, Czach is the executive director of Affirmations. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show, chatting about Affirmations, the organization, and the things that people can do as an ally, action words as an ally. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. That's Tia Graham. I am Nick Austin here hanging out with you. We're going to be recapping what went down at Michigan Central a little bit later on in the show. Looking forward to that conversation. Were you out there as well, though? Did you have a good time? What was the experience like for you? We'll be able to reflect whether you saw it on TV, whether you were downtown hanging out with us, and in fact, we've got coverage online at WDET.org, which you can check out also, including photographs from yours truly. That's right. When I'm not a radio host, I also gallivant around a little bit as the station's shutterbug. All that's going to be coming up, though. In fact, looking forward to this conversation about Michigan Central reopening. We will get into that when we return on the Metro.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at the University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new Master of Science degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. Admission is open to qualified applicants with a bachelor's degree in any field. Course selection is flexible, with no prerequisites, 4 required courses, and 6 electives. Learn more at business.udmercy.edu.
I'm Rachel Martin. You probably know how interview podcasts with famous people usually go. There's a host, a guest, and a light Q&A. But on Wildcard, we have ripped up the typical script. It's a new podcast from NPR where I invite actors, artists, and comedians to play a game using a special deck of cards to talk about some of life's biggest questions. Listen to Wildcard wherever you get your podcasts, only from NPR.
I want to tell you about a new investigative podcast called She Has a Name. It's about a young mother who disappeared in Detroit in the summer of 1987. She Has a Name tells the story of loss and redemption, mending broken family ties, and facing the trauma experienced by countless individuals who've lost loved ones to violence. Join host Tanya Mosley and her nephew Antonio as they unravel the secrets of what happened to Anita Wiley. You can search for She Has a Name in your podcast app.
It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. And Nick and I both had the pleasure of attending the concert yesterday at Michigan Central. Nick, what was your favorite part?
Well, I was going to say the music. No, but seeing everybody together, so uplifting. It was a great event. You look around, not a lot of trash on the ground. People just feeling good vibes together. Fireworks. I wasn't expecting that behind Jack White during his performance.
You mean fire.
It was fire. So yes, a lot of heat. But honestly, it came together great. All love, all vibes there. That's the energy that you would want for this kind of concert. So I thought it was a really cool showcase. How about you, Tia?
Indeed. No, I loved almost everything you just said as well. The music, the fire, and the fans and the people who were just there, just walking around, just experiencing everything, all just having this communal vibe together, just all happy to see this reopening. So I want to start with one of the folks that I ran into, Marianne from Detroit. She was with her sister. She talked about how her sister picked her up from the station in the 80s and it's all of the nostalgia she has being there yesterday.
It's like a rebirth. It is amazing because in the late 80s, her and I would come here and actually take a train. I took the train to Chicago and she would drop me off and she would come and pick me up on my way home and everything. And I clearly remember it from the 80s, how cavernous the main lobby was. Oh, yeah. And then a few years later, it started deteriorating. And off to the sides, they had the alcoves and everything. And then what really stuck in my head are the long church pews that were up front right by the railroad tracks. And you can picture the people coming home from war and their women waiting for them, you know what I mean, sitting on those, a lot of history on those seats back there.
And I think about that history and you walk around, especially when you see the limestone has been refinished at the Michigan Central Station. But then as you're walking around, you're running into people everywhere. Drew Sconey is a local musician, Nick. You also know Drew Sconey is rocking special gear in celebration of the reopening. And he just talked about being from Detroit and how excited he was to be there.
to really be from Detroit, you know where it's been, and to see where it's at now, to see the progression, it kind of makes you proud. It's like you're having that city pride in a sense, you know, being here, seeing the train station rebuilt. They even made some shoes. Shout out to Burn Rubber. They made some train station shoes, and homage to the train station. So, you know, everybody's, you know, here for Detroit. We love Detroit, and this is one of them days it's good to be outside.
Indeed it was. It was a little windy, but it was a perfect day to be outside experiencing the concert, a free concert of Detroiters and just Detroit love. And lastly, we did run into a famous Detroiter, Judge Greg Mathis. He says it's nice to see the changes happening in the city, especially being a former employee.
I worked for the city council and the mayor during the dilapidated years. And the biggest complaints we got from citizens was that we had a 1,000-foot floor building that was dilapidated and was a source of drug abuse, homeless, etc. And now look at it. It's the most sparkling feature we have in Detroit now, and the whole nation is going to say, wow.
And wow is what we were all saying when we were there. Just a beautiful night, beautiful day to be around Detroiters and experiencing that. But Nick, we do have a conversation with someone who is important to the Michigan Central reopening.
Yeah, that's right. We just heard from folks who were there, but all of this is happening because of the purchase that occurred by Ford Motor Company. A little bit of background, of course, Michigan Central Station first opened its doors in 1913. It was a really big deal, a historical marvel, great sign of architecture, and at its peak in the 1940s, you're talking about serving 4,000 passengers a day. Station ends up closing in 1988 because not as many people riding trains, not riding as many horses either, but you know, sometimes transportation methods change. But it wasn't until 2018 that Ford Motor Company decided to purchase the location, and it's been 6 years coming to this date, nearly $1 billion in restoration into getting the place back up to snuff for this reopening that we saw yesterday. So what's the plan moving forward? It's going to be open to the public. What can you do to get involved? Why even make this decision in the first place? To answer all these questions and more, we're joined by Mark Truby, Vice President of Communications for Ford Motor Company. Mark, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me, Nick and Tia.
Yes. Yeah, pretty excited to have you here because I can only imagine for you, 6 years, nearly $1 billion to get to this point. Concert just happened. I'm going to let you reflect. Spike the football if you have to. What does it feel like in this moment to finally be here?
Yeah, I was just talking to one of my colleagues, and it's almost a weird feeling this morning to wake up and say, oh, wow, that all happened last night. And that 6-year journey that we've been on, you know, kind of came to fruition. That was pretty special, I have to say. You know, and I still remember that when Bill Ford decided that he wanted to make this decision, and a bunch of us got together and said, well, you know, how are we going to announce this? How are we going to tell the world about it and the reasons why? And he had, you know, Bill had loves the city of Detroit and had driven by the station, and it always had bothered him that it was the symbol or the photo that was used to depict the tragedy of Detroit, of a tragedy of a broken city. And we kind of knew that wasn't really the story of Detroit, but that's the way it was being told. And then, you know, his mind was racing about the future of mobility and technology and how all that doesn't need to be in Silicon Valley or Austin, Texas or Boston. It could be right here in Detroit, but we have to make a place for that to happen. And all those ideas sort of came together in his head, like, well, what if we bought that station, and what if we could do it right then and there, and also do the Albert Kahn building beside it and make it a 30-acre, you know, ecosystem, and also just a great place for Detroiters to go. Like when you got friends in from out of town, you're probably going to want to say, hey, let's go down to the station and go get a bite to eat. You know, this is what it, you know, so it was a great feeling this morning to think back and say, wow, first of all, Eminem played and all these, you know, all these people. And we were able to give something to the city of Detroit, but it's been a 6-year journey.
Yeah, quite a journey. Not an easy one, too, right? Everybody's looking at the successes that you've had here. It looks beautiful. But what were some of the challenges that you guys faced in this renovation that people might not know about?
Well, there was a big challenge in the restoration itself because, I mean, there's few examples around the world where you could of a restoration of this magnitude, of this scale. And after the company bought it and we really got in it, we realized, you know, there was millions and millions of gallons of water that had to be pumped out. the amount the building had been stripped. So the restoration itself, I mean, it took 3,000 people who really cared. I mean, these folks were so dedicated. And then COVID hit, and it was like, okay, well, are people still ever going to want to work in come to work in a place, or is everything going to be work from home? And that kind of slowed things down a little bit. But, it was all for the good because it allowed us more time to really figure out, how to restore the building to its original grandeur, but also how to get the right partners, the right hotel people, the right companies. We've got now 100 startups in the building adjacent to it. So in a way, that extra time wasn't a bad thing because we were able to really make it all come together.
Well, when we talk about the tenants that you mentioned, one of the things you talked about was having it be a space that's available for the public. What's that looking like? When can people go in and see it? And what will the space be like for community members who want to experience it?
Well, so for the rest of this summer, first of all, for the next 10 days, we're going to do public tours, and they're really great. I hope you guys get a chance to do it because they're really interactive. All the history of the station, the artifacts we found during the restoration.
You got to sign up for that, or can I just show up?
Well, it's already the next 10 days is already sold out. That's going to be 60,000 people going down and through the station. But for the rest of the summer, we're going to have the weekends for tours. So there's going to be plenty of chances for the public, everybody listening. You're going to get your shot. Just keep an eye on, go on social media, go to Michigan Central's webpage, and you can sign up you'll get your chance to tour it. And it's a really interactive experience, and that'll be great. As it moves forward, you're going to see restaurants, you're going to see, bars, you're going to see art installations, you're going to see events. A lot of events will be there. And then obviously there's going to be a lot of business going on there. Ford's going to take 3 floors ourselves. The top few floors are going to be a hotel. We're down to 3 or 4 finalists to choose the hotel, which will probably be announced later this summer. And so it's just Google Code Next is already in there. So we think that with all the publicity around the last week or so, our phone's going to be ringing and people are going to be wanting to get in there.
We're speaking with Mark Truby, who is the Vice President of Communications for Ford Motor Company. In recent years, and you've been talking about it a little bit here, we've seen a lot more investment in the city of Detroit. The brand is really getting recognized nationally, internationally, arts and culture. But I think for residents and communities who were the foundation of making this happen, sometimes they can feel there's a disconnect. Maybe you get left behind. You have a place like Ford move into Michigan Central. What's going to happen to the surrounding community there? That's been there the whole time, even when Michigan Central was down for 30 years. For folks who are concerned about what you guys moving in as tenants means for the neighborhood, what would you say to them?
Well, what I would say is from the very start, Bill's clear direction was, let's not make this a corporate takeover for sure. And so we just had numerous, we had dozens of meetings with the folks in Corktown and the folks in Southwest Detroit and said, what do you want? And what don't you want to see? And, it led to a lot of good decisions. For example, in Southwest Detroit, Mexican Town, they were saying, the station's part of our community too, but it seems like we're kind of, the station sort of turns its back to us. And we were like, oh, that's a good point. So now if you go down there, you see, it's almost like 2 front doors. The Corktown side, Southwest Detroit side, you've got that greenway that leads all the way down to the river. So we were able to make some decisions there based on the community input because we never wanted to call it a campus. We try to avoid that word because campus has a feel of like it's kind of walled off from whatever's around it. We want it to be an open space and an open platform. And obviously it's going to change life a little bit in those communities, but we wanted to make sure that we did it in such a way we were listening all the time and that hopefully they'll say, gosh, this has made the neighborhood more vibrant, not, something that they don't recognize.
So, Mark, any plans of the rail coming back on, turning back on? Do we see that?
So there's ambition to do that. I think a lot of things will have to happen. That's probably, you're thinking 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But there are a lot of people interested in bringing passenger rail traffic back into the station. We would love that. I think that would just be amazing. And I lived in Europe for 6 years, so train travel is wonderful. It's a great way to get around, and you hear all these stories of all these people that were there yesterday and have been there saying, oh, we used to go to Chicago, we used to go to New York. So if we can bring it back, we will. But I think, it's going to take a lot of public-private cooperation and also with the rail companies in order to make that happen. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. It really isn't.
All right, Mark. Well, we're going to have to keep you locked in, learn more about this as it progresses, as you get these tenants in, because I got to figure out a place to get a bite to eat in the area anyway. But Mark Truby, Vice President of the Ford Motor Company, thank you so much for joining us. I said Vice President, Chief Communications Officer, Vice President of Communications. That's you. Thanks for being here on the Metro.
Thank you, and congratulations on 75 years.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. Hanging out with you, Tia Graham's here. I'm Nick Austin, and we're talking about mobility, which deals with the future of mobility. What's that going to look like? And artificial intelligence is something that we are certainly thinking about when it relates to how we progress in this space. We're not the only ones thinking about it here in Detroit, though. Even with the investment now of Michigan Central's renovation, we've got folks like Google, we've got New Lab who are there, which we just heard about. But when we talk about artificial intelligence in a grander scale, our country is concerned about it as well, because there is a lot of promise in terms of speeding up things like vaccines, making our lives more convenient, but there's also perils, concerns about things like deepfakes, discrimination based on biased algorithms. So how do we balance these elements of artificial intelligence, and what should we be most concerned about when it comes to AI? Well, one person thinking a lot about this is Arthi Prabhakar, who is the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology. She spoke last night about artificial intelligence at Michigan Central's grand opening event, and we've got her with us right now. Arthi, welcome to the Metro.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Nick.
Yeah, happy to have you here. Want to get into this idea of artificial intelligence, but before we even do that, can you tell us just briefly what the Office of Science and Technology Policy is and what you guys do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the great fun and privilege of being President Biden's Science and Technology Advisor, and part of that is running a small office right at the White House. What we think about every single day, the president likes to talk about how America is the only country in the world that can be defined by a single word. That word is possibilities. That gets me really excited every time he says that. And science and technology is part of creating those possibilities for our future. And our job in our office is to look across all of American innovation and help make it as strong as it can possibly be so that it builds the future that we all want.
You know, I think when we think about artificial intelligence a lot of us are thinking about ChatGPT. We're thinking about these chatbots, basically, right? Predictive language models. But outside of ChatGPT, when we're talking about AI and what it is already doing in our world, do we see it in other places? How do you define what artificial intelligence is, and what are you looking at in this space?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, because even before chatbots and image generators burst on the scene, AI was actually already in our lives. You might think about the fact that there's AI behind the ad that's getting served up when you're online and surfing around, but you might not be thinking about the fact that AI is behind whether your mortgage application gets accepted or not, or whether your resume makes it through the filter when you lob it into a company. You might not be thinking about the fact that AI is behind what kind of treatment you get when you walk into an emergency room. And so it was already in our lives. Now these generative AI tools, really we're interacting very much more directly with it. And so I think it's much more visible to everybody today. But I think all of these examples really just highlight how broad it is. It's in so many different dimensions of our lives. And very much to your point, enormous promise. Think about the efficiency that's possible. But if you get it, there's a bright side and a dark side. Great efficiency is possible, but if you get it wrong, you're being efficient and embedding bias and exposing private information. That's not okay. And of course, great creativity with generative AI, but It can also lead to misinformation and disinformation. It can lead to safety problems. We want a future where it makes everyone more productive and workers can do more and earn more, but we also know it can hollow out jobs. So we've got some big choices to make, and that's what the president's aimed right squarely at with the work he's doing on AI.
I appreciate that framing because that is what we're concerned with. And one of the ways I believe the administration is trying to show they're on the front end of this is by coming up with a blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. Can you let us know what that blueprint is and what you hope it does in terms of our progress in AI?
The blueprint was a place to start. It came out in October of 2022, even before ChatGPT first hit the world. And what it did was put a stake in the ground and say, these are our values, what we care about as Americans: safety and security, freedom from discrimination, protecting privacy, making sure workers have great opportunities ahead. And so, when things are changing as fast as they are with AI today, there's no more important time to be clear about how we're steering. We're going to steer by the light of these values. So that's where it started. But then the work that's been done over the last year or so that the president and Vice President Harris really focused in on has been about pulling every lever under existing law to get the government moving to start AI on the right track. And it's actions as specific as guidance, so that today if you go to a bank and you put in a credit application, it's probably going to be an AI system that decides whether or not you get your credit application filled. Well, if you get a no, they have to make sure that they can give you an explanation. Yeah. Using AI doesn't get them off the hook. And you need to be able to have the transparency about why you got the answer that you got. That's one of a dozen examples where we are making important progress towards, protecting people's rights as this technology rolls out.
I know I don't have you forever. I got to ask you one more question, though. So many things we could get into. But one of the things I think about is in this technological space, this idea of moving fast and breaking things, leading to innovation. I think a lot of us have heard that phrase used, but that also has concerns. Breaking things, what about society? What about that mortgage application you just mentioned? So when we talk about balancing our progress in this space versus this idea of moving fast and break things, how do you think we balance these ideas out? Where's the administration when it comes to that?
I'll tell you exactly how I think about that. I don't see it as much as a trade-off as we need to go hard after the risks and the harms and be really rigorous about making sure that this technology is used in safe ways that really strengthen our values rather than eroding our values. And at the same time, as we get AI right, then we also need to go hard at using it to do the country's work. And I get really excited when I think about how AI can help us tackle diseases that seem impossible today and predict weather in ways that are much more that really can tell you what you need to do in your neighborhood out for an extended period of time. There's so much potential, and that's why it's been so important to the president to get AI right on the right track.
Arthi Prabhakar, Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham here with Nick Austin, who is not AI. He is not artificial. He is real.
Some way disagree with you there,
Alrighty
Tia.
Then. But you know what? You're real. I see you here. Coming up, we'll return to the past and see how museums are reckoning with their colonial treasure hunting histories. You all stay right there for the Metro.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Some of the most revered artifacts from ancient civilizations are preserved in museums located far from their original homes. Many, including the famed Rosetta Stone, were taken by colonizers and treasure hunters who brought them back to their imperial resting places. But a movement led by prominent archaeologists aims to change that. They are lobbying to repatriate cultural and historical holdings, which include remains of indigenous people. NPR's Scott Detrow has the story of one museum in the United States that is doing just that.
It was Bonnie Seymour's first day on the job at the Nashville Parthenon. Yep, it's a replica of the real thing. She was taking a tour of the museum's collection when behind a set of purple doors, she came upon hundreds of pre-Columbian artifacts.
A lot of arrowheads made out of different materials, especially obsidian, hand tools like axes. I have a grinding stone.
Immediately, Seymour knew what she had to do.
And my first thought, just looking at it, was just like, well, this can't stay here. This has to go back home.
Seymour is the registrar and assistant curator at the Nashville Parthenon's museum. Since she started the job a little over 2 years ago, she has been on a mission to return the museum's pre-Columbian collection back to Mexico. I asked her why it was so important for her to send the artifacts back.
Because they're somebody's history. They represent someone's ancestors, and we're not them. Mexico has a history of people taking their things, and they have huge gaps in their history. And though returning these won't fill those gaps entirely, it will help with, assuaging bad feelings and hopefully solving some of the missing pieces.
You know, one thing I was looking forward to asking you is that this is a story that's been playing out over several years all over the world, museums large and small. And I think one of the thoughts that a lot of people have is, I remember going to this museum or that museum, and I remember seeing these exhibits and learning a lot about this culture and feeling like I learned something and I knew something about them, and that opportunity goes away. What is your response when somebody pushes back against this idea, talking about something like that?
Well, that is a very hard question. I want people to be able to see these cultures and learn about them. But I also don't think that we should keep things from people when they want them back. A lot of times these items get to museums in unethical manners, and that needs to be examined. But each case of repatriation is different. There's so many pitfalls in each one, but there needs to be compromise and collaboration and discussion. Overall, these pieces belong to the globe, but they are individual pieces representing an individual culture. And yes, we have buy-in as a visitor, but they have emotional and historical buy-in.
Have you gotten any criticism from around Tennessee for this move?
No, surprisingly. I was kind of expecting some kind of, how could you do this? This is ours. We should keep it, whatever. And it's been totally positive, supportive, happy. I've had people come in and cry when they see it. So it's been great.
Can you spell out specifically who the items are being returned to and if you know what their plans are yet?
Yes. Well, I can tell you who they're going to. They're going to the Mexican Institute of Anthropology and Archaeology. And the plan so far is that the Atlanta consulate's going to come pick them up from us and then at some point bring them to them. And then after that, I don't know. That's the one thing about repatriating something. Once it's out of your hands, it's out of your hands. You have no control over what happens.
Is there any flip side feeling to that? Like, obviously you want to do this. You feel very passionately about this. Is there any feeling of like, this is not my responsibility anymore?
Well, it's like, in a way, I'm really happy they're going, but in a way, it's like they're kind of like my friends, and I want them to have a good life once they leave. So I'm hoping that they will be taken care of, but it's really their responsibility at that point. I don't want to be like a helicopter mom to these artifacts, but yeah, I'd like to know, what are you going to do? And, let me know how they're doing, that kind of thing. Let's check in.
Is there one artifact that you have grown most close to or appreciate the most that you're just going to be, even if you know this is the right thing to do, sad to see go?
Yes, it's the Xolo dog. He's like this kind of a basketball-sized fat dog with a grin on his face, and he's still got dirt in his mouth from when he was excavated.
Wow.
Yeah, I've put him on like kind of a special thing in the center, so he's greeting people when they come in. But one thing we're trying to do is try to get 2 or 3 pieces 3D printed so that they still have a connection to the people here in community in Nashville. because it's also part of our history now too. So it'd be nice to have them for educational purposes. And that piece is the one I want to get 3D printed the most. So he'll still kind of be here in spirit.
That's Bonnie Seymour. She's the registrar and assistant curator of the museum at the Nashville Parthenon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great.
From NPR, I'm Scott Detrow.
That was Scott Detrow from NPR. And you're listening to The Metro. I'm Tia Graham here with Nick Austin. And Nick, the next conversation that we have coming up is about weather. And speaking of the weather, today it's going to be a little chilly. 70 degrees is a high, slight chance of rain this afternoon. Saturday, we'll see partly cloudy skies and a chance of rain as well. A high around 79. And Sunday, mostly sunny, beautiful skies. Temperatures will be near 78 degrees. So looking pretty good for the weekend, especially Sunday.
Yes, but as you mentioned, Tia, we have had some rough weather here on Wednesday. An F1 tornado unexpectedly touched down in Livonia, and it resulted in tragedy. One child died, and the child's mother was left in critical condition. While predicting weather is never an exact science, the National Weather Service is forecasting a warmer than average summer this year, and meteorologist Steve Considine spoke with WDET's Pat Batchelor about weather patterns this summer, beginning their conversation discussing how Steve creates a 3-month forecast.
What are some of the factors you look at when you make a 3-month forecast?
Patterns in the Pacific go into effect, particularly like La Nina and El Nino, although the strength of those are not as do not affect our summer weather as quite as much as they do our winter weather. The Climate Prediction Center uses longer range computer models that go out a few months to help. Obviously, there's going to be some degree of error in those longer period forecasts, but they do use computer model simulations. They look at weather patterns in the past. If we were right now, we're coming out of El Nino conditions from this past winter, so they may look at some summers where we were coming out of an El Nino to compare what the climate patterns were. And of course, they also look in recent trends, like the past 10 years, the fact that we've been a little bit warmer and wetter than normal.
One recent trend that I've noticed is that we've already had several tornadoes in Michigan this year, a couple of destructive ones too. Every time I turn on the Weather Channel, it seems like tornadoes are devastating some part of the country every day. What's driving that, and do we face a higher risk of severe weather this summer?
So what's been driving the last month is we've still had a very strong upper-level jet stream, and we've combined that with pretty much summertime heat and humidity, particularly to the south of Michigan. So those two factors, when you have heat and humidity, you have a lot of instability, and then coupled with a strong upper-level wind field, that is what's raised the increase in severe weather. Aside from the tornadoes that we had in the Kalamazoo area, for the most part, the worst of the weather this month has been south of Michigan. We've just been a little bit too far north from the instability. Trying to predict whether or not we're going to have an active severe weather season or not is a little bit challenging at this point. Typically, if we have a warmer, wetter summer, that is usually going to come with more thunderstorm activity, and certainly that raises the potential for severe weather. Interesting, in Michigan, our peak severe weather season is actually June through August, whereas you go farther south in the country, it's more in the springtime. So we're really just getting started in severe weather season in Michigan.
Right. And of course, we had those 6 tornadoes in southeast Michigan last August. The other thing that stood out from last summer was the air quality. We had those wildfires in northern Canada that polluted our skies several times. At one point, it got so bad, we had the worst air in the country for a time. Now, of course, that kind of thing is harder to predict as well. But in general, how does smoke affect temperature and precipitation?
The smoke doesn't particularly have a big effect on precipitation. With the amount of smoke that we had last year, then that could affect to some degree the temperatures limiting the amount of radiation from the sun. Last year was a little bit unique in that we had a record-breaking fire season in Quebec and Ontario. So those fires were much closer to Michigan than what we've seen this past year, where they're farther west in Canada. And so because they were so close to Michigan, instead of having the smoke primarily elevated aloft, we had it quite a bit down, funneled down into the surface. Thankfully, the fire season in Quebec and Ontario is not looking anything like what it was last year. So that should prevent the frequency of these smoky skies and air that we had last summer.
Steve Considine is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in White Lake Township. He spoke with WDET's Pat Batchelor.
I'm Tia Graham. Nick Austin is here. You're listening to The Metro. And coming up, a new club is preparing Detroit students for work in the mobility industry. Stay right there.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. The Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan are working on an initiative to give kids the ability to test drive career paths. This year, students were taught coding and programming skills that will prepare them for a future in the mobility industry. Here's the story. The Detroit Grand Prix brought over 10,000 attendees to downtown Detroit this year, but a few of them had a special seat at the track. Alexander Villagomez and Isis Christensen were at this year's race as part of the Mobility Industry Club, an initiative created by the Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan and the Penske Corporation. The Mobility Industry Club is putting Metro Detroit students on track in the automotive industry, says Elise Dixon, the Chief Program Officer of the Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan.
It's learning how technology is now being the forefront when we think of mobility, and no better place to start than Detroit, the Motor City, and setting kids up for the future to have careers in this dope, amazing industry.
While the Mobility Industry Club has been around for a couple years, this is the first year featuring an autonomous component, adding computer science skills like coding and programming. Alexander Villagomez is a Cass Technical High School senior who's part of the club, loves to code, and heard there was a unique opportunity coming up.
I was really excited because this was something I haven't done before, and I wanted to gain more experience to deepen my interest and my knowledge in different fields.
Alex and his 7 teammates traveled all the way to Abu Dhabi to compete against 18 teams from across the globe. They were the only U.S. team in attendance.
I'm more so happy that Detroit got the opportunity to represent itself, represent the country, because it's been such an impact throughout its history into this entire nation, and to continue to show that Detroit is here to make big changes and represent.
The students' car raced at 24 seconds to get around the track the first time, and by the end of the competition, the team was able to get their car down to 20 seconds on the track. The team came in 5th place, coming only 2 seconds behind the team that ended up winning the whole competition. Alex says he didn't know what to expect from the experience, especially being a student of color from Detroit. But he says everyone was welcoming to him and his teammates.
Even though they expected like the team to be completely white, which is understandable, but when they realized that it was full of black and brown kids, it was incredible to like kind of push that agenda out. Like, it's not just white, it's all types of colors.
Elise Dixon says the kids saw an opportunity and seized it.
So to compete against high school, university seniors who have been doing this for 5-6 years, oh my gosh, so incredibly proud of their resilience, of their just energy, their motivation. All of it goes to them.
Mason Christfield is the father of Isis, a junior at Detroit School of Arts. This was Isis's 2nd year with the Mobility Industry Club. He says now he looks at the world of racing differently.
I've looked at it just as, cars going around and going very fast. But now that she has such a compelling insight, I want to bring her down and ask her what does she see, and like what did she learn from her experience, and is there anything that she can take from seeing it in person, with the Grand Prix here.
Alexander Villagomez plans to attend the University of Michigan Ann Arbor in the fall to begin a degree in computer science. He hopes what he learned in the Mobility Club will help him in his first year.
In college, I just expect to use those same skills, especially as I run into deadlines, whether it's final work or different programs in college. So I'm definitely going to use the skills I learned in the industry club throughout my college experience, and I hope it will help me, especially my freshman year.
Students will continue to test drive their future in the mobility industry at the Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan's headquarters, located at the new, reopened Michigan Central in Corktown. That was a story that I did featuring the kids from the Industry Mobility Club there at the Boys and Girls Club of Southeastern Michigan. But that is the Metro, Nick. That is the Metro. We had a pretty fun day yesterday, though, at Michigan Central.
Yeah, and I'm going to have a fun time sleeping for the rest of my day. That's
Are you recovering?
Right. Hey, it was late. Too late for me, but you can always listen to this show on demand, whether it's late or early, online at WDET.org. Recent episodes are there. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. And thanks for joining us this Friday, June 7th episode.
For sure. The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Fieldbrandt. Our engineers, Nate Bender, Anil Scott, and Sydney Walkley, are our assistant producers, and music is done by Sam Bobian and Will Sessions.
The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Thanks so much for listening to us today, and have a great weekend.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.